It was the kind of summer day that lingered heavily in the air. July 18th, 2009. The Lakeside Ridge Equestrian Show was winding down under the orange haze of late afternoon light, the field still buzzing with the dull clink of tack, the shuffle of horses being loaded, and the low murmur of exhausted parents packing up folding chairs and half-eaten lunches. For Carly Jensen, 14 years old, the day marked the end of her season, and what she didn't know then, the end of everything familiar. Carly had placed third in her final jumping round. Not her best ride, but not a disaster either. She smiled politely for photos, accepted her ribbon, and walked Indigo, her gelding, back toward the barns. Multiple spectators recalled seeing her there, long blonde ponytail, light blue riding shirt, hands resting gently on Indigo's bridle. Some said she looked calm, others said it was distant. But everyone agreed. She left with her trainer, Doug Mercer. Doug had been Carly's riding coach since she was 8. He was a fixture at local events, stoic, even-tempered, rarely without his weathered baseball cap and thermos of instant coffee. To the casual observer, he was just another middle-aged man who lived at the edges of someone else's ambition. But to Carly's parents, he was a trusted figure. Carly's mom had once said, "Doug's the only one she listens to when she's scared." That trust would fracture within hours. Around 4:15 p.m., Doug and Carly were seen loading Indigo into his white gooseneck trailer. A volunteer noted Carly tying the last strap herself. She was meticulous, the woman said later. That's what stuck out. Everything had to be just right with that horse. Then the trailer pulled away. 3 hours later, Doug arrived alone at the Jensen family ranch. He unloaded Indigo like he always did, methodical, quiet. But Carly wasn't with him. When Dana Jensen came out asking where her daughter was, Doug simply said, "She wanted to stretch her legs at a rest stop. Said she'd call. He claimed he'd dropped her near a gas station 30 miles back, thinking she'd catch a ride with someone else from the show who was headed their way. She was mad," he added, "didn't want to talk." Donna assumed there'd been a fight. Maybe Carly was sulking. Maybe she'd gotten a ride with a teammate and would show up within the hour. But by sunset, no one had seen her. None of her friends had heard from her. Her phone rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. By 9:30 p.m., panic had replaced confusion. Dana and her husband drove the route Doug claimed to have taken, stopping at every rest area and gas station. No one remembered seeing a teenage girl in riding boots. No surveillance footage showed her face. By midnight, they filed a missing persons report. The responding deputy asked the usual questions. Did she have a reason to run away? Has she ever done something like this before? Was there tension at home? The answers were all no. Carly had never run away, never threatened to. She was grounded, organized, and careful. Her room back at the ranch was still in the same neat shape she'd left it. Her calendar had the next month of riding lessons marked in color-coded pen. Her toothbrush was still wet. Her overnight duffel from the show was still in the trailer, unzipped, untouched. Doug was questioned within the first 24 hours. He repeated the same story, that she'd asked to be let out around 5:20 p.m. at a rest stop between Waverly and Cross Bend, that she seemed frustrated, wanted space, that he hadn't questioned it because Carly's independent like that. When asked why he hadn't called her parents to confirm her arrival, he just shrugged. "I didn't think I had to," he said. But nothing about Carly's life suggested spontaneity. She didn't take risks. She didn't go places without telling someone. And she loved Indigo, fiercely. The idea that she'd leave the horse, her gear, and her own ride home without a single word never made sense to those who knew her. The search ramped up quickly. Dogs were brought in, flyers printed, interviews conducted across the fairgrounds. Every rider, parent, and vendor was contacted. The trailer was dusted, the truck inspected. Nothing. No blood, no hair, no sign of a struggle. Indigo was calm, uninjured. To police, it looked like Carly had simply vanished somewhere between the showgrounds and home. Doug never changed his story. He expressed confusion, sadness. "I'm worried too," he told the press. "I just did what she asked." But behind closed doors, Carly's parents were growing more convinced something had gone wrong. and Doug knew more than he was saying. In the coming days, the case would balloon, stall, and eventually cool. But on that first night, the mystery was raw, devastating, and unbearable. A 14-year-old girl had entered a trailer with her horse and never came home. And for years to come, that single detail would echo in every search file, every tip line call, every faded flyer. Carly Jensen was last seen loading a horse into a trailer. Then the trailer came back. But she didn't. In the early hours after Carly was reported missing, investigators focused where logic and routine pointed them. The rest stops along Route 17. Doug Mercer had been adamant in his statement. According to him, Carly asked to be led out near a small gas station off the highway, frustrated, tired, wanting space. She needed air, he told the deputy. Didn't say much more than that. But as officers pulled surveillance from every known rest area, diner, and fuel stop along the corridor, the story began to unravel. There was no footage of Carly exiting any vehicle, no grainy clip of her walking across a lot, no time-stamped shot of a girl in riding boots, nothing. By 7 a.m. the following morning, a grid search was underway along the rural stretch between Waverly and Cross Bend. Volunteers combed ditches, wooded paths, and shoulder lanes. Helicopters circled. Canine units swept behind old convenience stores and drainage tunnels. But without a precise starting point, every hour that passed widened the margins of error. And by noon, investigators had a new piece of data, one that would shift everything. At 12:36 p.m., Carly's cell phone provider confirmed her final ping. 4:32 p.m., July 18th. The signal had originated not from Route 17, but from a low-coverage farming district known as Danner's Hollow, roughly 15 miles north of the fairgrounds and significantly off the route Doug claimed to have taken. It was a narrow stretch of land with no real rest stops, no shops, no pedestrian pull-offs, just old roads, fallow cornfields, and barns spaced wide between thickets of woods. To those who knew the area, it was an odd place to end up, especially for a girl who was supposed to be headed south. Investigators asked Doug again. Had he taken a detour? Had Carly asked to see something? His answer was flat. I don't know anything about Danner's Hollow. I'm stuck at 17. When shown the ping data, he said nothing, just blinked, said maybe her phone had glitched. The officers noted the change in demeanor. Still, without physical evidence, Doug remained a witness, not a suspect. The trailer had no trace of blood or disturbance. The tires were clean. The timestamp on his truck's GPS, dated to the driveway of the Jensen Ranch, matched his timeline. The route, however, didn't. The unit hadn't recorded a direct path down Route 17. There was a data gap between 4:14 and 5:03 p.m., a nearly 50-minute window unaccounted for. The GPS reconnected somewhere near the Crossbend junction, then resumed normal tracking all the way to the Jensen property. When questioned, Doug blamed it on signal loss, claimed the GPS unit often failed in rural zones. Tech investigators couldn't disprove it, but the timing was suspicious. Carly's phone had dropped off the grid the same minute the GPS had. Meanwhile, public pressure grew. Carly's face was now on news tickers, morning radio, and statewide bulletins. Dozens of volunteers continued to search along Route 17, unaware the last trace of her had come from an entirely different direction. Danner's Hollow was never canvassed. No command center was set up there. No dogs were sent in. That early failure would haunt the case for years. In town, theories bloomed like weeds. Some believed Carly had run away. Others whispered about boys she might have been seeing, none of which proved true. But the loudest theories orbited Doug Mercer. Rumors resurfaced about his past coaching relationships, about a girl who had quit riding suddenly the year before, about a complaint filed at a different stable in 2006, later dropped, about why, in 2008, Carly's parents had quietly discussed moving her to a new trainer altogether. Dana Jensen later confirmed it. There was a weekend when we caught him yelling at her, not discipline, screaming. She was crying. We told him one more outburst and he was done. But Carly had begged them to keep him, said he knew how to work with Indigo, said she was fine, so they stayed. And just 1 year later, their daughter was gone. Investigators began revisiting Doug's file. A background check revealed a minor assault charge from 1994, bar fight, dismissed, nothing since, no convictions. But privately, some officers noted how he seemed emotionally detached during interviews. Not cold, not panicked, just vacant. Like he was filling in a form, one deputy said. Like this wasn't about a kid. Just a delay. Despite growing doubt, law enforcement had nothing actionable. Nobody. No eyewitnesses, no trace of Carly beyond the ping near Danner's Hollow. As days turned into weeks, the search narrowed to digital forensics, phone records, email, text logs. But Carly's phone never pinged again. It had gone dark at 4:32 p.m. and never resurfaced. Investigators speculated that either the battery died or someone turned it off permanently. In press conferences, officials maintained hope. They asked for tips, for memories, for dashcam footage that might have been saved. But momentum slowed. People moved on. Even the volunteers grew quiet. And so, as the summer faded, so did the urgency. Still, something remained broken in the timeline. A missing stretch of 50 minutes, a last signal from the wrong part of the map, a truck that reappeared where it shouldn't have been. And beneath it all, a suspicion that the story being told, the one about a rest stop and a runaway girl, wasn't just flawed. It was fiction. In the days that followed Carly's disappearance, public interest zeroed in on one man, Doug Mercer. He wasn't a stranger in Carly's life. He was a constant. At 43, he'd become a fixture in the regional equestrian scene, coaching competitive riders up and down the Northeast Circuit. He was methodical, soft-spoken, and had a way of making parents feel like their kids were in capable hands. But when a girl you coached for 6 years goes missing while in your care, people start to look closer. Doug didn't flee. He didn't change his story. From the outset, he answered every question detectives asked. He sat through 2 polygraph tests and passed both. He provided access to his phone records, his truck, and his property. He maintained the same account with quiet consistency. Carly had insisted on getting out of the truck. She was upset after the competition. He didn't know why, and she'd said she'd figure her own way home. That was all. To many, his composure read as proof of innocence. He wasn't defensive, didn't lash out, didn't run. But to others, especially Carly's mother Dana, that calm was the red flag. He didn't act like someone who just lost a child, she would later say. He acted like someone who lost a schedule. Detectives began to dig deeper. A background check turned up nothing major. One dropped misdemeanor from the 90s. A bar scuffle in Syracuse. No restraining orders, no criminal charges. But it wasn't what they found on paper that bothered them. It was what surfaced in whispers. A former student came forward, a woman now in her 20s, saying she'd left Doug's program at 15 because he started getting weird. She described how his tone had changed when she turned 14, how he became overly interested in her training routines, her diet, even what she wore at events. It wasn't overt, she said, just off. You knew to stay polite and stay away. Another girl remembered him once putting his hand on her knee during a long ride home, just long enough to register as wrong. These accounts weren't enough to build a case, but they shifted the tone of the investigation. Detectives re-interviewed riders who had trained under Doug during the same years Carly had. Most didn't have anything to report. A few recalled him as strict. One called him emotionally flat. But one girl, now a college student, said she saw Carly and Doug arguing that morning behind the barn. She couldn't hear the words, but Carly looked shaken, Doug agitated. Then Carly stormed off toward Indigo's stall. Still, this was circumstantial. No footage, no recordings, just memory. Detectives followed protocol. They searched Doug's truck, his trailer, and the small ranch quarters he rented behind the Greenleaf stables where he worked part-time. Nothing. No physical evidence, no carpet fibers, no hair, no trace of Carly. His devices were clean. His movements aside.